and gentlemen, welcome to the Gwangju International Center and our GIC Talk. I am soen-yu, a volunteer of GIC. The GIC was established in 1999 to promote intercultural understanding among local and international residents through various programs and projects. This weekly GIC Talk is one of our major programs, and every week the volunteer speakers share their knowledge about culture, history, politics, and arts with listeners. It is wonderful that the GIC Talks have been happening since 2003 through the willingness and support of so many volunteers. Before starting the talk, please turn off your cell phone or switch it to silence mode. And today's topic is internal displacement in Colombia, public and socio-economic policy. The UN Refugee Agency noted that internal displacement in Colombia was one of the largest and oldest problems in the world. But many people don't know that there are large numbers of displaced people living under very hard circumstances. So I hope today's talk will help you learn about Colombians who are neglected in their society. From now, let's learn more about international placement in Colombia from today's speaker, Juan Esteban. He studied a master's degree in anthropology at Portland State University. Let's welcome Juan Esteban with a big hand.
Thank you. Good afternoon. That was a good introduction about the topic of internal displacement. It is a topic that many people don't know, especially in Colombia. So today I'm going to talk about what's happening in Colombia, and I'll give you a little bit about the conclusions that my research had. If you're interested in the analysis and the data background and the methodologies, I'm more than glad to give you that afterwards, since I only do have 34 minutes. So let's begin with a global context of IDPs, or internally displaced persons. This map right here shows IDPs protected and assisted by the UNCHR, the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. As of 2009, Colombia has about 3.3 million displaced persons registered with the government. So this number is by the government. Different numbers by different non-governmental agencies have different numbers, some higher. And as you can see here in the Americas, Colombia is the only country with a growing number of IDPs. Different countries, Mexico, Ecuador, also have IDPs, but they're being resettled at a much faster rate than Colombia's IDPs. This number of 3.3 million started from about the mid-1980s, so it's about 26 years, these numbers. And this map shows also that it's one of the highest in the world. So what is an internally displaced person? The Colombian Constitutional Court came up with the definition in 1997, and I'll read it to you right now. A displaced person is someone who has been forced to migrate within the national territory, abandoning his or her place of residence or daily economic activities because his or her life, physical integrity, security, or personal liberty has been violated or directly threatened within the following situations: the internal armed conflict, which has been happening since the 1960s, disturbances and internal tension, general violence, massive human rights violations, infractions on international humanitarian law, or other circumstances arising from the prior situations that can alter or disturb public order. So it deals mostly with violence. And a different definition comes from the United Nations on a report they did on guiding principles on internal displacement. And their definition is somebody who has been displaced due to armed conflict, generalized violence, violations of human rights, or natural or man-made disasters, but they have not crossed international borders. So they differ in that sense that the United Nations counts people who have been displaced due to natural or man-made disasters. And this research looks only at people who have been violently displaced. In the world, there's about an estimate of 27.1 million people who have been displaced. This is according to the UNHCR. In Colombia alone, there's 3.3 according to the government, and the CODES, the NGO, counts it at 5.2 million. So, and this is out of a population of 45 million people. So, looking at the percentages of numbers, IDPs in Colombia make up about 12 to 19% of IDPs worldwide, looking at whichever number you want to look at, and then 7 to 11.5% of the total population of Colombia. The research site was Bogota, which is the capital city of Colombia. Did a 6-month ethnographic research from April to September 2009. And they participant observation, interviews with non-displaced public, government workers, and internally displaced persons as well. They totaled about 120 interviews. And I did archival research at universities, libraries, and government offices. So in Bogota, there's about, in 2010, 280,000 people were displaced, according to quotas. 43,000 arrived in the city of Bogota in 2009 alone. And since 1985, there's been about 300 to 400,000 IDPs in the city, which makes about 3.5% of the total population of residents in the city of about 80 million people. So why do people move to Bogota? It's the social and political capital of the country. It's the largest city. People believe that there they can get best aid from the government. And the possibility to escape violence and also be able to get help with work and other situations that they might not get in the rural areas where they're displaced. So where is Colombia? Colombia is in the northwest corner of South America. It is bordered by Venezuela to the east, Brazil to the southeast, Peru to the south, Ecuador to the southwest, and Panama to the northwest. There's, I said, 45 million people in Colombia. It is separated in 5 geographical zones. You have the Caribbean region, Pacific region, the Andes region, separated into 3 mountain ranges, the eastern, central, and western, the eastern plains, or the Llanos Orientales, and then the Amazon. Most of the IDP population comes from the Caribbean in this area, which is a cool area right here in the Pacific, and then Arauca right here in the eastern plains. But displaced persons do come from all parts of society. And each of the 5 geographical regions has its own music, culture, food, weather. So there are various differences within each region. So in Colombia, there's a fight for oil. What's happening in Colombia right now? Natural resources. There's oil reserves in the Llanos Orientales, the eastern plains. These areas are heavily controlled by FARC and guerrillas, and the government is trying to fight them so they can get into these natural resources. And then also coal in the Caribbean region, having huge coal mines in this area. There's historical presence. Social movements beginning in the 1930s, coalesced later into the FARC and guerrilla movements in the 1960s, and then paramilitaries in the late 70s and early 80s that are still causing big problems there. Laws directed at IDPs have been very progressive. However, they haven't been followed very well. As I said, the definition from earlier, this comes from Law 387, written in 1997, and it states that IDPs have the right to humanitarian aid, receive basic human rights under international law, be protected from discrimination due to their situation, socioeconomic status, ethnic background, language, religion, public and political opinion, place of origin, or disability. They have the right to reunite with family members lost due to violence, demand due resolution to their problems, return to their place of origin, receive personal security from the government, and move without restriction throughout the country. Law 387 also states that the government must prevent further displacement, provide humanitarian aid, help people return to resettled lands of their choosing, and help stabilize IDPs socially and economically. 6 years later, in 2003, sentence T062 was passed, and this guaranteed additional rights to IDPs. And those rights included access to land, dignified employment, housing, social integration programs in the settlement areas, medical attention, adequate nutrition, community rebuilding initiatives, education, political participation, and protection from actors in the armed conflict. However, a year later in 2004, sentence 025 passed, in which the Constitutional Court said that the government had failed in all aspects of providing help to the IDPs. As the Constitutional Court said, these generalized violations were due to structural failures of the government seen as a whole. Thus, an unconstitutional state of affairs had arisen in the field. And T025 in 2004 has now become the normative framework for providing help to IDPs. The ruling declared that national and local authorities must adjust their budgets to meet the demands of IDPs. It also requires that groups representing IDPs be allowed to participate in the legal process of improving the unconstitutional state of affairs, and the court itself appointed to help the advancement of laws and ensure that all laws are followed. So what's the reasons behind displacement? Forced recruitment, the war, armed conflicts since the 1960s has caused groups such as the FARC, and guerrilla groups, and paramilitary groups to seek fighters. One of the ways they do it is to forcibly recruit individuals, threatening them or their family members if they don't fight for either group. So people either decide to fight for them, get murdered, or they have to flee. Physical or psychological violence. Physical violence can be counted anything that's domestic violence or the war. Death threats from these groups or any other group. And then torture of murder of family, friends, neighbors. So people who don't want to experience that themselves leave their land or homes. Or they're believed to be the sympathizer of the enemy. So if a paramilitary group believes that you're with the FARC, you might get threatened and therefore are forced to flee your land. So what happens after displacement? Many people come to urban centers. One of the biggest receptors of IDPs is Bogota, the capital city. And there's a process of declaration. So what is the process of declaration? An individual who does not have any social networks or social ties within a city must see how they can get help through the government. So there's 3 government offices that someone can go to. They go to the government office and they talk to a government worker. And they tell their life history up to the point when they were displaced, the violence they experienced. That person, the government worker, then writes a report, sends it to Acción Social, which is the government office dealing with IDPs. Acción Social is supposed to take 15 to 20 business days to decide whether this person is telling the truth and therefore register them as an IDP or not. And then they're able to get state aid. However, the 15 to 20 days is not the usual business order. It takes, from my interviews that I had, it can take anywhere from 30 business days to over a year before Acción Social tells somebody whether it's displaced or not, and therefore gets state aid. If you are registered as an IDP within the country, then you have the right to get state aid. These include about $100 per month for 3 months in order for you to get groceries, pay for utilities, or anything of that nature. Access to education. If you have children, they are required, they have the right to attend public schools. You also have the right to health care in all public hospitals and clinics within the city. However, that usually doesn't happen, as the Constitutional Court has declared. So what types of violences do IDPs experience? I mentioned a few. Let me get into more detail on those. State violence. This is created or supported by the government, and this is against people who they think are insurgents or are trying to undermine the government themselves. So usually against guerrilla factions such as the ELN, the FARC, and the EPL, or people who they think are sympathizers or are supporting the guerrillas in Colombia. In 1991, you see shift of civilian-controlled army after the new constitution was written. And this is because in the 80s, the military in Colombia had huge amounts of human rights violations. So one of the things they did in 1981 was to make this shift to civilian control. However, there is still threats from insurgency during this time. So one of the things that the newly formed control of the military did was to ally itself with paramilitary groups. Paramilitary groups attacked guerrilla factions, and even though that after 1981, the military's human rights records improved dramatically, paramilitary human rights violations went up at the same percentage. So there's a human rights violations correlation between these two, and Aviles discusses this very well. Plan Colombia was written by Colombia and the United States, and it was used to fight drug and smuggling and insurgency, and end the armed conflict that had begun in the 1960s. However, soon after it was built, in order to help people transition from crops such as coca plants or marijuana leaves, this turned into a military and counterinsurgency tactics. For example, Meltzer and Rojas show that 85% of foreign aid by the United States between 2000 and 2005 went to military endeavors rather than social development projects. And then in 2002, former President Alvaro Uribe wrote this idea of democratic security, in which he states that the military has the right to go into any region of the country to protect the rights that they believe have been lost due to the fight against guerrillas. And it also states that all individuals, all citizens, must fight along the military. And if you're not fighting against the guerrillas with the military, then you're not considered a patriot or a citizen of the country, and therefore may be subject to the enemy of the country. Structural violence is a systematic violence performed by social institutions and the actors within those institutions. It creates large-scale inequalities that cause oppression. Structural violence marginalizes people. In this form of violence, social institutions exclude people politically, dominate people socially, deny people access to social services and welfare, and exploit them for economic gains. Institutions that perform structural violence include governments, international boundaries of development, local municipal offices, schools, and public at large itself. Let me just say that violences, there's many forms of violences in Colombia. I just separate these three forms that I'm talking about for analytic purposes. But there's many, many forms of violence. In the early 1990s, there's an economic opening in Colombia, and this is in part due to opening the economy to international corporations. The United States is giving money for the war on drugs, the war on terror, now called the Overseas Contingency Operation. These two ideas are tied, coincided at the same time in the late 80s. For example, the war on drugs, the Andean Initiative, in 1989 provided about $2.5 billion in 5 years to fight this. And in order for Colombia to receive this money, they had to open the economy for international corporations. Foreign aid must be received so they can fight against drugs or terrorism. There is resistance and a continuous resistance by guerrillas, though the resistance itself is now highly unsupported by the public. Less than 3% of the public supports the guerrilla. And then the government has responses, does not respond to people who are displaced or the process of displacement. Rather, the government has a response after they have resettled. So despite the billions of dollars of aid, little goes to the help IDPs. And the help that does go to it is a small percentage of the total foreign aid that Colombia receives from the United States. Symbolic violence is the loss of social modes of control, dominance, and discrimination. One of the things that we see is the narratives of othering and invasions narratives that I'm about to discuss. And this deals with the idea of uprootedness and loss of morals. For example, Gwangju discusses the fact that in Africa, like what's happening in Colombia, refugees and IDPs who have left their home have a loss of physical homeland, now have a loss of moral bearing, state of uprootedness. They are alien cultural identities since they're not tied back to their homeland or their place of origin in this case. So the public condemns them. As in Colombia, people talk about IDPs as invaders within the city, or othering narratives, stigmas, erasure of identity, and then we create an identity that is not a positive one. So other narratives, one of the examples is invasions. In the last 10 years or so, large portions of the city like this have been what a non-displaced public calls invading, or invasions, invasiones. And people have come in and squat on a piece of land, makeshift tent. After a while, they build a brick house, and soon enough, they have whole communities of this. This particular picture is taken in the south of Bogota, in the locality of Ciudad Bolívar, thought to be one of the worst and unsafest part of the city itself. So other narratives, just like invasions, also come with uneducated. For example, many people think that IDPs are uneducated, they don't deserve the education that they're supposed to be given by the law. An example is somebody that I talked with in an interview, a non-displaced individual, Marcela. She says that IDP children are taking spots from regular citizens of Bogota away. And that these children that are coming from rural areas have no right to take the spots of these children, despite the fact that the law says that they have the right to have spots. Or you have narratives such as that they're liars or they steal money. For example, one of the many government workers that I spoke to says that IDPs steal money, and he likened them to cow farmers. And every time I talked to him, he always said that they're milking the state for all the money, that they're just lying, and he did that motion every time. In this picture, you see wait lines for IDPs. People have to wait for several hours. Many people come in at 2 in the morning just so they can wait in line, and they don't get attended until 11, if they do get attended until 11 in the morning. And the little money that they do have was spent on the bus ride or anything like that. And it takes a long time before they get to talk to an office worker like this and be able to ask for state aid that the law requires. So other narratives, the public, such as uneducated, they're liars and they steal money, or they're invading the city in which they have the right to come to. And then you have an erasure of existing cultural identities. Many social scientists in Colombia are saying that people in the non-displaced public and the government are lumping IDPs into one group, IDPs. And the fact that people come from all these areas in Colombia that are diverse in culture, in histories, and being lumped into one and giving them an identity are erasing the existing cultural identities that they had come to the city with. However, everything isn't negative and there are positives. There are social movements, there are policy changes. Policy changes are happening very slowly, but and social movements are happening. One of the things that's happening in government offices are that people are reproducing their own strategies to get the state aid. So they know the fact that once they arrive into this government office, they're going to be maltreated by somebody, a government worker is going to talk down to them. So they're going to do what Scott calls a public transcript. They're going to play to the government worker in order to get the state aid that they think they're going to get if they let them talk that to them. However, in a hidden transcript, talking to other IDPs, talking to NGOs, talking to social scientists, they say that they're treated badly, horribly. So there's two transcripts, if you will, of what's happening in the government offices that will allow government offices. And in order for them to get the extra funds, they do the public transcripts with the government. So housing, education, and healthcare. Other things that they do is voice concern about living conditions through marches. This picture here is one of the marches done in South Bogota during the week of migrant held by the Catholic Church. And they contest other narratives. They have different reasons why they're marching through the streets of they're stopping traffic, they're being visible, so they can voice their concerns. And they're showing that they are not only, they're Colombian citizens and they deserve the rights that the law says they do. So these marches are done at specific times. One of the many marches across the country was happening before Independence Day. And this is so that news coverage gets taken up by what they're fighting for and marching for during the days off and before people go on holiday. Or during the week of migrant, as the picture that I just showed you was done, when the Catholic Church supports such marches throughout the city. So there's a symbolic meaning when these marches occur. Another thing they do is government takeovers. So a lot of IDPs are not getting the adequate housing that the law requires. So this is one instance, but this is happening throughout the country. This is in Ciudad Kennedy, Bosa Wow office, this building right here. It's a 3-story building. And one of the things that IDPs here, on the street are doing, they were saying that workers there were horrible, weren't providing the help that they were supposed to get. So the takeover happened for about 7 months. People slowly came in, took over the waiting area. After a few months, after a few weeks, more people came in, and by the end, several hundred people were on the street making makeshift tents, kitchens, houses. And so IDPs demanded better treatment from government workers and better housing, and they took over a spot, a place, a government office where they were being denied housing, and now they made housing out of this place that they were being denied housing. Another thing they do is, or that people do, is public takeovers. There's an example right here, is takeover of the 7 Park, a park that was built about 10 years ago. Just over 1,000 people took over this park in order demanding housing rights that the government had yet to provide. So they took it over for about 4 months. The public and media outlets described it as invaders. Very little coverage of the reasons behind this takeover were provided in the media. And the interesting part is that this park was made as an urban development project, and the city itself was very proud of it. And during the time in which it was taken over in 2009, the royal family of Spain came to visit Colombia because the 5th International Congress on Victims of Terrorism was being held in the country. And so one of the things that the Colombian government wanted to do was show the royal family around, show off a little bit. However, the park was being taken over, so they tried desperately to kick these people out who had been victims of terrorism out of this park during the time when the royal family was coming to visit for victims of terrorism. So a bit of conclusions. Laws are changing. There are new laws. Things aren't that negative, or they are negative, but things are changing for the better. IDPs are responding to this. They're taking to the streets. They're taking over government offices. They want their voices heard. Public policy is still hard on them, especially elsewhere outside of the city. Despite the fact that laws within the city are helping people outside the city, there's still lots of problems. So future work, I think that generational, especially since these numbers, whether you look at the government numbers of 3.3 or the NGO of 5.2, the IDP voice, generational gaps, what's happening? Are people being successful in integrating into urban centers? What's happening with children once they do or do not get access to education? Are laws being followed by government workers, by institutions such as clinics, hospitals, anything like that? And then the IDP's voice, the fact that that non-displaced public is lumping them into one big group. IDPs are not just saying that we're an IDP, we're also Afro-Colombians, we're indigenous populations, we're women, single women, we're handicapped individuals that have been displaced, and we have rights as well. So one of the examples that you see is Afro-Colombians from the Caribbean region are creating strong groups within that's creating a new voice that's fighting against this lump of IDPs. And then one of the things that should be looked at as the root causes. What's happening? Why is this happening? The government is dealing with the after effects. Once people resettle in urban centers, they're helping them, providing healthcare, providing housing, providing as best they can. Some people say very good, some people say very badly, but one of the things is that we should look at the root causes instead of the after effects. Displacement within Colombia. Are there any questions? I think.
Okay, well, thank you for your talk. Let's give you time. Okay, I think some of you may have grabbed a piece of white paper when you came in. If not, raise your hand. We can give you one. Write down a question, raise your hand, and we'll collect them. Okay, and I'm going to start with a question. What is your connection to Colombia?
I think I'm Colombian. My family moved to the United States in 1990. So I still have that connection with my family. So, and the reason I went to Colombia to do my master's degree was the fact that I'm interested in political anthropology, state, power structures, interactions with individuals, and so I saw that this is very good business.
It sounds like many IDPs are from rural areas. Are any of them from urban areas?
Yes, in the last 5 years, inter and intra-urban displacement has occurred, and the majority of reasons behind urban displacement is either through domestic violence, people are trying to escape domestic violence, gang violence, and then the new violence that's happening is paramilitary groups are coming into these so-called invasions and taking over neighborhoods, and people that they believe were fighting for the other side, the guerrilla side, are being threatened once again.
Is there a difference in treatment from the government, rural versus urban IDPs?
From what I saw, as long as when Acción Social does its research and they believe you're telling the truth and they talk to local authorities and they do the research and they say that you are displaced or not displaced, there isn't really a difference. However, some government workers told me that fewer people can prove that they're displaced in their percentage.
What is the public education system like? You mentioned that the government offers education assistance.
Right.
So do most people pay for public education?
So public education is free, but most people don't like public education. If you can afford private schools, then people will take you to private schools. However, usually if you're from a rural area and you're coming into public school, which is usually a very cool, people will take that advantage and try to put their children into public schools.
And you said it might take anywhere from 30 days to 1 year
Yes.
to reach the status, to get the assistance from the government.
Correct.
So during that time, do they have access to health care?
Once you declare, you get a letter saying you have declared. You can put your family members who you fled with, and that letter gives you 30 days of health care. However, after the 30 days are up, the letter is expired, and if you don't get an answer from the government saying whether you're displaced or not, then your health care ends after those 30 days.
Okay. Are most IDPs displaced because of drug trafficking issues?
Drug trafficking have to do with paramilitaries mostly and the taxation by guerrillas. IDPs usually are caught in the middle between that war or that armed conflict between the state and paramilitaries against guerrillas. Some IDPs do plant illicit crops such as coca leaves where the production is contained, but IDPs usually are not part of that trade. They're caught in the middle between the guerrillas and paramilitaries who are exporting.
Okay. What are the guerrillas' goals?
It's a very complicated issue. If you don't mind, I'll just go into the history of this one. So in 1930, the Conservative Party had just lost power in its presidency after 30 years, and the Liberals came in. They rolled back laws, they changed laws for peasants. After a 30-year rule, many peasants fought back against conservatives, beat them, things like that in rural areas. In 1948, there was an assassination of the Liberal Party president, and the conservatives took over for about 10 years, and this is a huge area, it's called the violence era, which huge amounts of people were displaced, and these peasants that were once fighting with the Liberal Party became fighters against the conservative, and in 1964 they finally coalesced into the movement. It's been happening for about 40 years now. The guerrillas.
Okay.
So it's a long history of armed conflict.
So, can we call the guerrillas terrorists, or is that?
Many international bodies have, I would say, yes.
Okay.
So their main goal was to get social movement, especially in the 1960s when in Latin America socialism was trying to spread. So that's what their goal was then, but it didn't pan out. And since people began to move to the cities in Colombia, about 75% of the population lives in urban centers. And the guerrillas are fighting in the rural areas, so very little support now exists for the guerrillas. And the goal now, some say that their goals of socialism has eroded away, and they're now just fighting just because they have nothing else to do after such a long time. For over 40 years of fighting, there's nothing much they can do except keep fighting.
And what is Colombia's relationship with the United States government?
From a lot of the media reports, Congress people in the United States, they say that Colombia is one of the longest democratic countries in the hemisphere. Colombia's politically very conservative, so they're usually aligned with United States politics. The United States gives them a lot of foreign aid. Now after Afghanistan and Iraq being the largest receivers of foreign aid, Israel is number 3, Egypt's number 4, Colombia is number 5, largest aid from the United States. So, especially in the region where Venezuela's to the left, extremely to the left, Ecuador, and other parts of the country, or of the South America becoming left, the United States sees Colombia as a huge ally in the region.
Okay. So can you go a little bit more into the state of democracy in Colombia?
So the new constitution in 1991, I mean, there aren't any trouble with voting. People don't have the right to vote. There are some cases in which people say that paramilitaries tell them to vote on the right, but it's not widespread. Presidents have a 2-term limit. There's been very little. There's only been one era of dictatorship. That was during the violence era, and then in 1958 they actually closed it and kept going with democracy.
Okay. What effects have the billions of dollars in aid had in Colombia, given the country had to open up to foreign corporations in order to receive it?
Mm-hmm. So most people in urban centers that are not displaced see this as a very positive thing. Cities like Bogotá and Medellin have become very, 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 very safe compared to 10 years ago, 15 years ago. They say that for crimes such as muggings, stolen purses, threats, Bogotá is one of the safest capitals in all of Latin America. So people are seeing this opening up the economy as a good thing. You have access to iPhones, you have access to Hooters, restaurants that you weren't there before. And different parts of the city are being developed to where you pretty much can be anywhere in the world. So most people in the urban centers say it's a good thing, and this is a large percentage of the population.
Okay.
A lot of people who are displaced would say otherwise.
Well, what is the the general population of Bogotá? What do they think about the IDPs coming into the city?
So, like I was saying, they seem very negatively light. There's this other narrative where there's somebody else who's not part of the residents here in Colombia. Some people told me, oh, I didn't know they were still displaced. I thought we took care of that problem before. So there's a very negative light. The people say, oh, they're the people who are selling pirated DVDs on the bus, selling candies on the street, asking for money on the corner when they should be asking for money since the government already gave them money, things like that.
Okay. And what's the government's future plan for IDPs?
Future plan for IDPs? So the newest laws that I showed are the things that was happening. Due to T025 in 2004, just 2 years ago, many writs have been written. So people of African descent, like I was saying, handicapped, single women, are getting more rights than before. However, they're still not being followed exclusively, just very small numbers are being held.
And is there anything that we can do for them?
I think as U.S., well, I don't know how many people are here from the United States or not, but those large numbers, for example, in the last 11 years, $8 billion of taxpayer money are going to Colombia. So I think knowing more of where that money is going to, the fact that it's going to fighting insurgency, whether you agree with it or not, people are being caught in the middle. So think talking about the fact that Plan Colombia, policy written by both Colombia and the United States, is affecting so many people. You can always, those who are not from the United States, that do pay taxes, and their tax money is going there. NGOs, you can always volunteer with NGOs, help out with NGOs, provide money with NGOs. CODIS is one of the largest ones. And they work directly with UNHCR. They're not affiliated, but they do work together.
I have a question. I think Colombia is a very stable country in the perspective of the politics. But I know the gangsters would export lots of the drugs to USA. And so that they are make lots of money in terms of exporting the drugs. And so there is a very confusion between the gangsters and the government. And so there are lots of the refugees who happened. But I think it's so many refugees have happened because of the gangsters fighting against the government military powers. I'd like to know, wondering why so many refugees in Colombia happened and moved to the other areas because of the drugs fighting or the other political reasons.
Right, so part of it is this idea of anti-drugs that Plan Colombia makes. So, like I said, paramilitary groups and guerrillas are exporting large amounts of drugs to the United States. And so, whether you think you should be fighting the supply or the demand, money's going to Colombia to fight the supply. And many people are caught in the middle. And that's a large percentage, not a large percentage, a significant percentage. But there's also other reasons why people are being displaced. For example, in 2007, Chiquita Brands Bananas settled with the Colombian government for $25 million, saying that they did hire paramilitaries to clear out whole towns and killing laborers and killing individuals. And it had nothing to do with the drug trade. It just had to do with the fact that they just wanted cheap labor and they didn't want anybody complaining, or they wanted regions where they could just come in and take the resources. So there are many reasons, and the drug war is one of the main reasons.
And so the confusion is like the Mexican countries by the use of drugs.
Right.
In Mexico country, they are very confused drugs fighting between the government and the
right. So I got city cartels, drug cartels in Colombia that were very prominent in the 1990s have died, and many of that has gone to Mexico. And I don't know how that, if there are any internal displaced people in Mexico due to drugs or not. You know?
Okay, so I guess that wraps up Q&A.
Thank you for your presentation, and we prepared a certificate of appreciation for you, and this will be given by Dr. Gwangju, the director of GIC.
Whenever we hear such encouraging problems around the world, we feel quite frustrated. And then on the other hand, we feel lucky that we do not have that much serious problem in Korea. But still, at the same time, we have to find a way to do something for the people who are suffering, as in Colombia. Hope we can have more resources to share with, for example, IDPs in Colombia in the future. Thank you for sharing such a good information with us. Hope you can be more influential to help the people there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope you learn something new today's topic. And there will be a meditation session by Jennifer Ulrich. And I have one more announcement. The Gwangju International Center has a May concert to raise funds for earthquake victims in Japan. It will be on Sunday, May 1st at 5 p.m. at the Gwangju Cultural and Arts Center's small theater. We hope that you can attend to enjoy folk songs of various countries in the concert and help Japan as well. For those of you who don't know much about GIC, it is a local non-profit organization which promotes intercultural understanding among local and international residents through various programs and projects. If you would like to learn more of GIC or support GIC as a member or as a volunteer, please feel free to talk to our coordinator or volunteers. They are all wearing name tags like this. Thank you for joining us today and hope to see you next week. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.